This program is rated PG. It contains themes and scenes which may not be suitable for very young audiences. Parental guidance is advised.
Be advised that the views and opinions of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
Although the Tienanmen incident passed already the commemoration last week, we thought it important enough to wait for our resource persons to be available to discuss and try to draw lessons from Tienanmen, because I think the Tienanmen incident is a watershed, and for China it is probably one of the demarcation lines between the old China and the new China today that is the envy of so many other nations. And of course we have, well, we'll go by age because the youngest to the eldest. We'll start with, although I promise not to mention it, we're all from Salle. Because our youngest member of the panel now is from Salle, poli-sci, Orion Yoshida. And the second youngest. That's nice to hear, isn't it? Chito Sta Romana. And not so young anymore in this group, Hiro Vaswani. You've seen him on in our discussions countless of times. And I also want to add that I think I'm always proud to mention that I try to invite Filipinos with roots in some of the oldest cultures and civilizations. We've had Filipino-Indian, Iranian Filipino, Chinese Filipino. Now we have a Japanese Filipino. But anyway, let's move on to the issue. Lessons of the Tienanmen incident. My questions, Chito, Hiro, and Orion, are why was I fooled so long that the Tienanmen represents a fascistic, dictatorial, heartless, cruel government, when it was not? Because we can discuss that, no? Maybe you will disagree. But there was a 60-day period of negotiations, discussions, and so on. It was not just a simplistic crackdown. Number two, the main event, the bloodshed, was not in Tienanmen, but we always thought the symbol of China, Tienanmen, was the site itself. Are we correct? That's why we asked Chito to join us, because he was actually there during that period as Beijing Bureau Chief of the American Broadcasting Corporation. Of course, we have Orion here to reflect on what the youth thinks about this, and find out what the impressions they have. Hiro, of course, is our financial and economic man, and he has certain views of what the Chinese economy at that time, up to today, represents, no, in the history of the world. So we'll start with the one who was there when it was happening in Tienanmen. Chito, I had those questions. What was your feeling about the government there? Was it really that distant from the students that they just cracked down, or?
No. It's a more complicated process. I was able to cover the Tienanmen demonstrations from the beginning.
Okay.
That
was
ABC
April,
News.
around April.
Mid-April, April
Mid-April.
15. What sparked it was the death of the former party leader, Hu Yaobang.
That was also April. Did it happen
April
very
15.
fast? April 15. Okay.
When it was announced that he died because of a stroke during a Politburo meeting, and it was announced in the media, and Hu Yaobang was very popular among the youth. But at that point, he was already under disciplinary measure.
Yeah, he was demoted, I understand.
He was demoted because he was accused of instigating the students 2 years, 3 years before. It's like a prelude to the Tienanmen demonstrations. Hu Yaobang was a protege of the Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping. And he was an advocate of both economic reform and political reform.
Yeah.
He was very close to Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping had the saying that if he died, everything was all set because he named 2 successors to hold high the heavens. One was Hu Yaobang, the other one was Zhao Ziyang. These 2 leaders were very close to Deng Xiaoping, but they did not see that Deng Xiaoping was really only for economic reform, not for political reform. Hu Yaobang advocated also political reform. He wanted to liberalize, almost democratize the Chinese socialist system. And
Democratized
for this,
with elections or?
with elections.
With elections, okay.
He was fascinated with the Western system. He saw the problems of the Cultural Revolution under Mao. And he thought there was a need to decentralize power. There was a need to have the people empowered through elections. He was not going to go do it in one swoop. But the key was he lost his position because he was criticized for being a bourgeois liberal.
So it was not Deng Xiaoping's act to demote him. It was the party, Politburo, or
Deng
collective
Xiaoping
decision?
agreed with it,
Okay.
that he went overboard. And so he was put aside. Zhao Ziyang was put in charge. But when he died, it resonated with, particularly at first with the Peking University students, the Beijing University students. So they went out to the square with wreaths, with his photo.
Yes,
And that's how it started, as a commemoration, as a remembrance of the sudden death of a leader. And then it grew and grew into a movement that eventually, that started first calling for accountability, more democracy, more freedoms, anti-corruption, anti-inflation. But it eventually, over a period of time and over an inner party struggle. You see, the crackdown was a result of a party split. Zhao Ziyang, who replaced Hu Yaobang, took a sympathetic view of the student demonstration. Deng Xiaoping and the hardliners took a hardline position. And
But
there was a split.
the hardline position is usually associated with Li Pang.
Yes.
But
Deng Xiaoping in the middle.
Li Pang sat down with the students in dialogue. I have some of the dialogues here. He didn't
He was
sound
forced
so.
to.
Yeah,
He
of
had
course,
to.
yeah.
He had to go through the negotiation. But now we know from other memoirs that there was an inner party struggle,
yes.
a struggle for the ear of Deng Xiaoping. Zhao Ziyang, the reformists, were trying to tell Deng Xiaoping, this is not a rebellion against you or the party. This can be solved through negotiation. The hardliner Li Pang and then the Peking mayor at that time were the ones telling Deng Xiaoping that they are actually causing turmoil and this is an anti-party movement, anti-communist party movement, anti-communist.
Was it or
movement.
was it not? Were there
In
factions
the
that
beginning, I don't think it was.
Okay.
But eventually, the slogans in Tiananmen Square changed from anti-corruption, for democracy, for reforms, into down with the Communist
Okay.
Party
Well,
and down with Deng Xiaoping.
Okay, we'll ask Orion if he has any reaction, question. And then, of course, Hiro, before the show started, was asking, did the Russian situation then, perestroika and so on, influence the thinking of the students and the general political environment? So, Orion, you have any question?
First question is what is the impact of yung humiliation na nangyari kila Deng when Gorbachev went to China back then when they couldn't go to Tiananmen Square because of the protest? What was
it a factor?
Is it a factor?
That was the immediate factor that led to the declaration of martial law. So you not only had a split in the party between Zhao Ziyang and Li Peng, the hardliners and the moderates. And then the students occupy the square. Usually it's in Tienanmen Square where they hold the welcoming ceremony. They had to do it at the airport. One of the few times, maybe the only time they had to do it because of the circumstances. And then they had to rush Gorbachev to the Great Hall of the People and go in a roundabout way. And yet the students in the square, they were carrying slogans. Long live Glasnost, Perestroika for China. So they were riding on the coattails of the Gorbachev visit.
Yeah, let's go to Hiro. You were asking that question. You have any follow-up to that?
Well, I think that also explains a lot. The Soviet Union was experiencing serious challenges to the actual makeup of the Union itself. Poland started to break up much earlier with Solidarity and Lech Walesa. And even the Berlin Wall, East Germany, Hungary. So there were pressures within the command economy bloc, basically the communist bloc, that saw essentially the strains that they were going through during that period. You have to understand the West had its own serious economic troubles in the early 80s. Hyperinflation, oil price hike, the Iranian Revolution. And this was causing basically shockwaves throughout the entire planet.
Let me fast forward to a point that you were making before earlier discussion. You're saying that all this turmoil, and my question is, including perestroika, glasnost, were these reactions which influenced also the students eventually, were these reactions to the sudden jump in oil prices? And you were
well, again, you have to understand that the loss of power amongst the big seven sisters, the oil companies, losing their pricing power to OPEC, South, Aramco, nationalization, then the Iranian Revolution. You had a massive shift of power, basically, and a massive oil price increase.
And how does this affect, how did this affect Russia and
Russia and China both being command economies, that created a huge arbitrage between the prices they were charging their own people and the world price. And whenever you have that huge difference, you will have pressures within that government because everything else, the cost of everything will start to rise up.
So the response of Gorbachev was to liberalize and so on. The question now for this first 15 minutes of ours is the consequence of Gorbachev's perestroika and liberalization, people now say was disastrous. If China had followed and the students were followed in Tienanmen, what would have been the consequences?
Okay. Actually, China at that point, Deng Xiaoping at that point, they knew about the Soviet reforms, and they tried it out. Deng Xiaoping's ideas of liberalizing the economy. He was experimenting with market forces, but when you release the market forces, and there is excess demand for limited supply, you'll have inflation, and that's what happened. And then when you release the state subsidies,
that's what happened in China.
In China, that
inflation.
created the conditions for the '89 demonstration. And then second, when you have state set or state subsidized coal prices, and you try to release the prices to market forces, the government officials that have monopoly over these products will try to sell it at the
black market.
At the black market.
Correct.
Or there will be a
Arbitrage.
differential. And this was the result of the corruption. So the students were actually complaining about this. What is ironic is that as the Tienanmen crackdown, the crackdown on Tienanmen, you had in China about 2 or 3 years of economic stagnation. Those who were opposed to Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms in the 80s, there were several among the party elders like Chen Yun and others. They wanted to revert back to the Soviet model. Deng Xiaoping then in '92 go full force with one lesson from the experience of the Soviet Union.
We'll go into that in the second part.
Okay, I'll hold off.
So yung economic